The soldier had just returned home and was startled to find a crowd of people gathered outside his house. He rushed forward to investigate but was stopped by the police. "No, this is my house. What happened?" Upon seeing this, a police officer inquired about his relationship with Soo Young. "She's my wife." It turned out that his wife was the victim of a recent crime. Just a few hours ago, a deranged intruder had broken into their home. Finding only the soldier's wife there, the perpetrator had mercilessly attacked her with a hammer before fleeing. By chance, the police had arrived and found the suspect covered in blood, leading to his arrest and detainment at the police station. The soldier's name was Kim Do-jin. He had noticed a pregnancy test at home, which had revealed his wife's pregnancy. Just moments earlier, his wife had called and asked him to come home urgently, as she had a surprise for him. Little did he know that the surprise was her pregnancy. This realization devastated him beyond words. He couldn't help but feel that if he had come back earlier, this tragic event could have been prevented. The more he dwelled on it, the more he despised the perpetrator. Overcome with shock and grief, he grabbed a knife and made his way to the police station, determined to seek justice for his wife. He stood outside the police station, biding his time until he could slip inside unnoticed and seek retribution for his wife's murder. But before he could get very far, he was called back by a man. The man informed him that he couldn't proceed with his plan because the murderer was being protected by a large number of police officers. Even as a special forces soldier, he wouldn't be able to do anything. He was surprised that the man knew his intentions and asked cautiously for the man's identity. The man introduced himself as Jang Tae-jun, and he led Do-jin to the main road where they saw a man in a suit stepping out of a car. Mr. Jang wanted Do-jin to handle that man. Do-jin, feeling suspicious, asked what crime the man had committed. The man replied that he had driven drunk twice, which puzzled Do-jin as it didn't seem like a crime worthy of the death penalty. However, the man explained that this person would continue to drink and drive and cause an accident resulting in 2 deaths in just 1 hour. Do-jin found the man's claim strange and asked how he knew that. The man calmly responded that he could see the future, and he challenged Do-jin to stay for another 2 hours to verify his claims. Though skeptical, Do-jin decided to stay and confirm. As he waited, a ball rolled over to him. He returned the ball to the girl and continued to wait. Sometime later, the man in the suit emerged, accompanied by a private driver. Do-jin began to doubt if he had been deceived, but then noticed that the man in the suit was already drunk and behaving rudely towards the driver. The driver, fed up with the man's behavior, abandoned the car and left. Do-jin had just started walking when he saw the man in the suit driving off. Remembering Mr. Jang's earlier warning, he immediately gave chase, but couldn't catch up with the car. He only heard the sound of tires screeching and a collision. The ball rolled over again, and Do-jin picked it up and hurried to the scene, where he was shocked and pained to see that it was the mother and child from earlier. The girl had already left, and the mother's condition was dire. Do-jin turned around and spotted Mr. Jang standing behind him. They then made their way up to the rooftop, and Do-jin confronted Mr. Jang for not intervening to prevent the accident. However, Mr. Jang explained that he could only foresee events a few days into the future. He knew that Do-jin was contemplating suicide, so he sought him out. He had a plan to form a team based on his future predictions to avert such tragedies. He also revealed that the person who had ordered the murder of Do-jin's wife was the same individual. Just then, a police couple were walking in the underground parking lot when a car suddenly raced towards them. The driver was the one who had issued the hit on the culprit. He seized the victim's gun, handcuffed him, and abducted the policeman's fiancée. He was an extremely deranged individual. He spared the male police officer's life to make him experience the pain. This twisted person intended to torture his fiancée. This perverted person was also seriously ill. Just as the handcuffed police officer regained consciousness, he had to figure out a way to remove the handcuffs in order to save his fiancée. This police officer's name was Kang Dong-soo. It turned out that the deranged individual from earlier was a prisoner whom he had arrested before. The situation was critical. A car rushed in and it turned out to be Sher-hyun. They quickly contacted Young Shin, who was a computer expert. She swiftly obtained information about the car being driven by the perpetrator and relayed his location to them. At that moment, the criminal had a gun pointed at them, and Do-jin quickly realized his motive was to avenge. Just as the criminal was about to pull the trigger, he failed to recognize that Do-jin was a special forces soldier. So with one fluid motion, Do-jin redirected the gun barrel. "You really underestimate your opponent," he said to the pervert, adding he felt repulsed to have to share the same air with such a vile person. He raised his gun and fired a shot into the criminal's lung, informing him that he had at most 10 minutes to live, and to slowly experience the pain like the victims he had preyed upon. After expressing his gratitude, Dong-soo's fiancée advised Do-jin to come clean, but with many tasks left to accomplish in the future, he could only bid her farewell. Previously, Mr. Jang had informed him that in order to prevent further tragedies, Do-jin would need to make a difficult decision. Despite the fact that killing innocent people would be considered a crime, it would result in saving many others. After completing the task, Do-jin looked down at his hands stained with blood, feeling the weight of guilt in his heart. Dong-soo arrived on the scene only to find that the murderer had already been killed. Frantically searching, he discovered his fiancée lying there. He held her tightly, overcome with pain and tears. Strangely enough, this was the exact scene depicted in the sketch that Yoo Soo-hyun had drawn, as she had a unique ability to see 3 days into the future and sketch frames of future events. Thus, Dong-soo and 3 others formed a special task force, relying on the sketches to identify the culprit. Although they could predict the death of Dong-soo's fiancée, they were unable to prevent it. Determined, Dong-soo promised himself that he would seek revenge for his wife. The police concluded that Dong-soo's fiancée had put up a fight before being strangled to death. Although the pervert had been shot dead, there was still a third person at the scene with scratches on their hand. Just as they were about to inform Dong-soo, Soo-hyun saw future events again and she drew 5 sketches depicting a man wearing glasses preparing to hang himself, a man reading a book, an object being knocked over, and a scene of a new murder. It was clear from the drawings that Dong-soo was the one holding the gun, and the man had scratches on his hand, suggesting he was the murderer. This man had taken action to end the culprit, but the motive behind him killing Dong-soo's fiancée remained unclear. It turned out that Mr. Jang claimed he could see the future and that if someone did not die, more people would have to die. This was the law of cause and effect. Although the person killed may not have been evil, it was sometimes necessary to sacrifice one to save many. Do-jin believed in Mr. Jang's words and acted accordingly. However, with his fiancée dead, Dong-soo would not give up until he found the person who killed her. At that moment, Do-jin was given a new target. The man in the photo was Nam Sun-woo, the owner of a top pharmaceutical company in South Korea. Mr. Jang informed him that the drugs created by this man would result in the deaths of hundreds of people. It turned out that his company was researching a cancer treatment drug for children. However, there were issues during the testing phase. Around 20% of the children suffered severe side effects, including the loss of all their nails, severe rashes, and some even died. This was the first time such a thing had happened during the clinical trial process, and it was recorded in Dr. Oh's report. As a result, Nam Sun-woo kidnapped Dr. Oh and took him to his company, where he was threatened and had all his fingers broken. Sun-woo hoped that Dr. Oh would not impede the launch of the drug. He also threatened Dr. Oh's wife and children, forcing him to relocate to another country. He further stated that Dr. Oh would be held responsible for the children affected by the drug. The terrifying threats, combined with Dr. Oh's fear for the safety of his family, left him with no choice but to compromise. Do-jin watched the scene from a distance. That night, Sun-woo went to visit his lover, a young and famous writer in Korea. Do-jin observed everything from afar. Meanwhile, Soo-hyun's team found a lead on the first sketch. The incident was set to occur at 7:40, which left less than 2 hours until it happened. They relied on the clues found on the wall in the sketch. The painting was auctioned off 2 months ago. Young Shim immediately sent the address to Soo-hyun. While the doctor was preparing to take his own life, Soo-hyun hurried over. As she was about to break in, the doctor unexpectedly opened the door. Soo-hyun entered and lied, saying she received a complaint about his room. Though the crime scene had been cleaned up, upon closer inspection, there were still signs of suicide. Soo-hyun was extremely suspicious that someone had already arrived early to prevent their plan. Upon reviewing the footage, she discovered a mysterious man who had arrived before them at 7:30. He might have caused the situation to change. She also realized that this mysterious man was the one who Dong-soo killed in the second sketch. To prevent Dong-soo from getting into trouble, they asked him to stay here for 3 days, and then they would release him. However, this led him to suspect that he might be featured in Soo-hyun's painting. Taking advantage of an opportunity, he knocked out his colleague and searched for sketches and documents. He later discovered that Dong-soo was the murderer who killed his wife and thus kidnapped Dr. Oh. In a different location, Nam Sun-woo entered a house to find his lover unconscious on the floor. Sensing danger, he attempted to flee, but Do-jin had already been waiting for him. Without saying a word, Do-jin attacked him. Nam Sun-woo immediately offered 1 billion won to save his life, but Do-jin deemed it worthless. Dong-soo intervened to stop Do-jin and demanded that he roll up his sleeves. After confirming that Do-jin was responsible for killing his fiancée, Dong-soo prevented him from completing his mission. Taking advantage of the situation, Sun-woo fled. Do-jin attempted to disarm Dong-soo, but he missed, and they began to fight. Do-jin held back because he felt guilty and didn't want to use his full strength. After a gunshot, both men fell to the ground. Dong-soo got up and aimed his gun at Do-jin, just as it was sketched. However, as a special forces soldier, Do-jin couldn't be easily subdued. The two continued fighting, and this time Do-jin used all his strength, defeating Dong-soo quickly. Do-jin spared his life this time because of Officer Min Ji-soo, but warned that he wouldn't show any mercy next time, even if Officer Min Ji-soo was there. The following day, Nam's Sunwoo's subordinates discovered Do-jin's identity. He arrogantly thinks of ways to take revenge against Do-jin. Sunwoo invited Dong-soo to become his ally. However, as an honest police officer, Dong-soo couldn't work with such a despicable person. He seemed to have predicted that Dong-soo wouldn't agree, so he was prepared with a new plan. Meanwhile, in another location, Seo-hyun was furiously sketching another painting. When her colleagues saw it, they were immediately frightened because she had sketched her own death. But she remained extremely calm. On that day, Sang-gu put his plan into action. He went to look for a gangster, who turned out to be the older brother of the culprit who killed Do-jin's wife. Nam's Sunwoo could help him get his younger brother out. The gangster quickly agreed and wondered why he was being treated so well. The plan was to lure Kim Do-jin with the perverted man. Over on the other side, they were analyzing the second sketch, which appeared to be a prison and a transport van. They quickly deduced that a prison break was imminent. Shihan's colleagues had identified the location depicted in the sketch. These days, Seo-hyun needed to be cautious about any potential danger and stay home. However, she knew that it couldn't be avoided, so she went to see her prosecutor brother in the evening. She didn't bring up the sketches because she didn't want to worry him. She just wanted to say goodbye to him for the last time and leave. But she never expected that her brother's appearance would be a crucial factor in the case's next development. The murderer was being transported to undergo a nerve check when he suddenly started foaming at the mouth. The police officer asked the van to pull over, but the van was being chased from behind. Before anyone could react, they used an electric clamp to subdue the police officer. Meanwhile, the perverted man had removed his acting mask. He lived up to his reputation and acted as if it was real. They released the perverted man and were about to flee when Seo-hyun appeared and aimed her gun at them. However, they were not afraid and threatened to inject poison into the police officer's body if she didn't put down her gun. Seo-hyun chose to drop her gun rather than witness innocent lives being lost. Sang-gu rendered the police officer unconscious, shot Seo-hyun in the leg, and then knocked her out. The police officer lay on the ground, resembling the sketch Seo-hyun had drawn. Shortly after, a few individuals arrived, but the group had already departed, taking Seo-hyun with them. Jae-hyun located Dong-soo and urged him to rescue her. Meanwhile, Seo-hyun had been transported to a warehouse. Young-ael-soo watched his brother leave and went into the room where Seo-hyun was being held captive. The man used a bandage to wrap her leg and attempted to touch her face, but she was repulsed and ordered him to leave. The perverted man became infuriated when she rejected his advances and viciously attacked her. He had already murdered multiple girls, but retribution was on its way. Seo-hyun hit him with her head and escaped from the rope. After knocking out the perverted man, just as she prepared to flee, a group of men arrived. Not seeing Il-soo anywhere and finding only the broken glass door, the thugs promptly sent his men to catch her. While the older brother of the perverted guy was parking his car below, he accidentally hit a pedestrian. It turned out that Dong-soo had been pretending to be a pedestrian and caused the accident. "Oh Dad, I could have had progeny, but now both my balls are busted," he shouted. Thinking Dong-soo was faking his distress, the older brother tossed him some money with contempt. However, unbeknownst to the gangster, Dong-soo had secretly planted a tracking device on the car and alerted his colleagues of its location. Meanwhile, Do-jin found out that the murderer of his fiancée had escaped from prison and was infuriated, vowing to take revenge. Upon the older brother's return, Seo-hyun was still nowhere to be found, but he quickly discovered that she was hiding in a closet. He ordered his men to put a bag over her head. She was gasping for breath like a fish out of water. It was a critical situation. Dong-soo burst in and ripped open the plastic bag, announcing that no one would be permitted to leave that day. Il-woo pulled out a gun, prompting Dong-soo to grab Il-soo and threaten him. In response, Illinois-soo grabbed Seo-hyun and threatened her as well. However, she quickly realized that the gun had no bullets due to her professional expertise. She coordinated with Dong-soo to subdue Il-woo, while Il-soo attempted to attack Dong-soo but was slower than Do-jin. Knowing he was in trouble, Illinois-soo resorted to his acting skills, feigning insanity and claiming to have killed Do-jin's wife while mentally unstable. Dong-soo criticized Do-jin for using a gun, while Do-jin believed that such an animal-like person deserved harsher punishment than the law allowed. Do-jin made Il-soo pay for his actions. Finally avenging his wife, Do-jin now faced a new problem as the one responsible for killing Dong-soo's fiancée. The two exchanged angry looks, and Do-jin warned Dong-soo that any attempt to stop him would be met with lethal force. The confrontation between Dong-soo and Do-jin continued. Suddenly, a black car came rushing towards them and masked men began shooting in their direction. To their surprise, it was a gas bomb. Do-jin was hit and quickly captured by the assailants. Dong-soo attempted to resist and picked up the gun, but he was shot in the shoulder. The police arrived promptly, and Dong-soo informed Jae-hyun of the situation. Jae-hyun immediately recognized the culprit as Nam Sun-woo, who had taken Do-jin to exact revenge for his near-death experience. Dong-soo sought out Nam Sun-woo and demanded the return of Kim Do-jin. However, Nam Sun-woo played the part of an old, sly fox and claimed that he wanted to exchange Do-jin for Dr. Oh's medical report. That night, Dong-soo went to retrieve the medical report from Dr. Oh, but the doctor was in critical condition and handed him a USB instead. However, before Dong-soo could receive it, Dr. Oh suffered a heart attack and died within seconds. Dong-soo then brought the USB to Nam Sun-woo, who gave him a glass of water as a token of gratitude. Without much thought, Dong-soo drank it all and was then given a pile of photos that showed him as Dr. Oh's murderer. As it turned out, Sun-woo had tampered with Dr. Oh's medication, causing him to become ill when Dong-soo went to see him. All of these events had been recorded by Sun-woo's subordinates, and Dong-soo quickly became a suspect in Dr. Oh's death. It turns out that the water earlier had drugs in it. Sun-woo's plan was really incredibly devious. First, he used the pervert to lure Kim Do-jin. Then, he manipulated Dong-soo into obtaining the medical report. After that, he set up Dr. Oh's death. Finally, he linked everything together to create a murder scene. But did his plan work? While refueling his car, he received a call from a stranger who warned him that he had underestimated Dong-soo and fallen into his trap. It turned out that Dong-soo had foreseen his plan and had seen through it long before. However, Dong-soo devised a plan for Seo-hyun's brother to find Dr. Oh first and report that his medicine had been tampered with. They then planned to stage a fake crime scene for Dr. Oh. Dong-soo also deliberately drank the water with the drugs in it to deceive the Sun-woo and discover Do-jin's location. Sun-woo returned and searched Dong-soo suspiciously, but to his surprise, he found a tracking device on him. He immediately knocked out Dong-soo and quickly changed the final location. At this point, Seo-hyun and Mr. Moon gave chase to Dong-soo, but quickly realized that the tracking device had been thrown into another cargo vehicle. As expected, Dong-soo was discovered and being transported to a different location. Meanwhile, Seo-hyun's team found the location where Dong-soo was being taken, which was in the same direction they had initially gone, but they were unable to turn back in time. Seo-hyun was the only one who could catch up, and with her help, Do-jin and Dong-soo were finally able to reunite. Nam Sun-woo decided to kill both of them and stage a fake crime scene. However, at that moment, Do-jin presented him with a gift. Sun-woo was a little surprised since he had just arrived, so he wondered how Do-jin could have prepared a gift already. It turned out that Jang had the ability to see the future and had informed Do-jin in advance to prepare this gift. Do-jin remained extremely calm and claimed that he had purposely allowed himself to be captured. Sun-woo opened the gift, and to his surprise, it was a bomb. It exploded. Only then did the despicable Sun-woo realize his fear and attempt to negotiate with Do-jin. In contrast to his words, he stealthily picked up a knife and headed towards Do-jin. He underestimated his own strength and was quickly overpowered by Do-jin with just one move. As he was about to give up, Dong-soo once again intervened, leading to a standoff between the two. But just as they were about to engage in a fight, Seo-hyun unexpectedly appeared with a gun. Although she didn't want the two to fight, she inadvertently gave Sun-woo an opening to attack and injure her. Witnessing this, Dong-soo and Do-jin also joined the fray. Dong-soo pointed his gun at Do-jin, but the latter quickly fled. Dong-soo gave chase, but then remembered that Seo-hyun was still battling Sun-woo. After a moment of internal struggle, he ultimately made the decision to go after Do-jin. Due to the power disparity between men and women, Seo-hyun quickly grew weak and vulnerable against Sun-woo. Just as Dong-soo was about to catch up with Do-jin, he realized that something was off. He remembered that Seo-hyun might be in danger, and unfortunately, she was. Seo-hyun's life was hanging in the balance. With one final burst of strength, she managed to turn the tide and strangled Sun-woo to death. Just as Dong-soo returned, they were helping each other to leave when Sun-woo suddenly regained consciousness and aimed his gun at them. As they thought their lives were over, Sun-woo suddenly fell down. It turned out that Do-jin had returned to rescue them and left again. The scene of Sun-woo's death was identical to the sketch that Seo-hyun drew, except the person in the drawing wasn't Seo-hyun but Sun-woo. In other words, Kim Do-jin had disrupted the scene in the sketch. After Seo-hyun's older brother and Mr. Moon arrived, she mentioned that there is another psychic with even greater abilities than her, and that person seems to be behind Do-jin. At that time, Do-jin was at Mr. Jang's place. Mr. Jang predicted all the events of the day, including Seo-hyun's rescue, and instructed Do-jin. While Seo-hyun and her brother were chatting in the car, another car suddenly rushed in and collided with theirs. When Shurhyun regained consciousness, she found her brother missing, but they left behind a phone. It turned out that Mr. Jang instructed Do-jin to take her brother in exchange for Shurhyun's notebook, which contained information about the mysterious person behind Do-jin. They agreed to meet in the park. Later that evening, Dong-soo left and Shurhyun arrived. Shortly after, Do-jin appeared, and Shurhyun gave him the notebook. He said her brother was in his room, and then he left. Shurhyun went to search for her brother, while Dong-soo was following and keeping tabs on Do-jin. But how could someone with a special forces background like Do-jin be easily tracked? He quickly spotted Dong-soo and called Shurhyun, informing her that her brother was in one of the rooms in the building. He threatened that her brother would freeze to death if he didn't reveal the room number. To prevent this, she needed to tell Dong-soo to stop following him. In order to locate her brother quickly, she called Dong-soo and instructed him to stop tracking Do-jin. But since Do-jin was the one who murdered his fiancée, how could Dong-soo let him go so easily? They ended up fighting each other. At that moment, Shurhyun suddenly remembered the room number she had previously sketched, which matched the number on the door. She relied on it to finally locate her brother. As Dong-soo was about to confront Do-jin, a car suddenly sped towards them. It was Mr. Jang who had come to pick up Do-jin. After returning, Mr. Jang confessed to Dong-soo that he didn't actually have the ability to predict the future, and that it was someone else who possessed that ability. Do-jin didn't have to wait for long. That person entered the room. As it turned out, it was the one he had just apprehended. To his surprise, he discovered that everything he had just done was orchestrated by Shurjun. If his younger sister had the ability to sketch the future, he could directly predict it. The plot twist in the movie left the audience in awe. Shurjun explained to Do-jin that all that he had been told to do were all for the sake of the country. Once again, Shurjun tasked Do-jin with assassinating the minister. On the day of the mission, the minister was aboard a yacht, and Do-jin had already arrived ahead of time. As the yacht began to sail, Shurhyun arrived just in time to save the minister from certain death. However, Shurjun's true target, the prosecutor, was killed by the next bullet. After Dong-soo discovered the sniping location, Do-jin had already left and even framed someone else for the murder, leaving a gun next to the body. In another scene, Shurjun killed Jae-hyun to prevent him from interfering with his future rescue missions. The loss was deeply felt as Jae-hyun was not only a good friend but also a respected senior. Before his death, Jae-hyun revealed that someone knew Shurjun's true identity, which worried him greatly. As it turned out, when Shurjun was interrogating Chairman Choi, a person who would cause society to suffer in the future, Jae-hyun unexpectedly showed up, and Shurjun had no choice but to kill him. Shortly thereafter, Jae-hyun's body was discovered. He had been an honest police officer. During his funeral, Shurjun approached Dong-soo to ask if he knew anything about the other person. However, this inquiry made Dong-soo suspicious that Shurjun was actually behind Jae-hyun's death. Only Dong-soo and Jae-hyun knew about this, so before he died, Jae-hyun intentionally revealed it to Dong-soo. From the analysis of the case, it can be inferred that Shurjun was the mastermind behind Do-jin and Mr. Jang, but he did not express this opinion to Shurhyun. Later that day, the two of them found Chairman Choi tied up, and he revealed that Shurjun had killed Jae-hyun. This revelation greatly shook Shurhyun, as she never expected her kind-hearted brother to be capable of such a thing. Dong-soo advised Shurhyun to take Chairman Choi away while he tried to stop Do-jin. The two began fighting, but Do-jin did not want to fight. Instead, he wanted to deal with Chairman Choi himself, as he feared that taking him to the police station would reveal their entire plan. Do-jin left Dong-soo behind and chased after Shurhyun, but he was too late. By the time he arrived, Shurhyun was already inside the police station. Do-jin called Mr. Jang to report the situation. Upon hearing the news, Mr. Jang was extremely worried and went directly to the police station. He then called Shurjun and asked him to tell the truth about Do-jin's wife and apologize sincerely after his death. In a hurry, he called his subordinates because Jang had another identity as the leader of the department specialized in public affairs investigation. Jang instructed his subordinates to take the suspect outside, stating that he would take responsibility for what would happen that day. They rushed inside, but Dong-soo managed to stop them. He asked Jang what he wanted to do. Although he was a leader, allowing a suspect to leave without permission was not a simple matter. The two departments were preparing to fight. An ambulance arrived because the suspect was injured, and they had to treat him first. However, Chairman Choi said he wanted to make a call. At this point, Jang knew he was calling the other person. He took out his gun and shot Chairman Choi before shooting himself in the head, committing suicide. Jang was a person who lived for justice. He believed that everything he did was a righteous and great plan, even if it meant sacrificing himself. As for Do-jin, the most painful thing was that he had unwittingly helped the enemy kill his loved one. It was at this point that Do-jin discovered that his wife's death was all planned by Shurjun, who saw Do-jin's ability and wanted him to work for them. They set up a trap for a pervert to kill Du Jin's wife. Overwhelmed with sadness, Du Jin lost faith in life. Then Jang appeared, pretending to save the world, to give Du Jin a reason to live and asked Du Jin to help him. Yu Shijun had used Du Jin as a pawn to harm so many people. Now that Du Jin knew this, he wanted to take revenge and kill Shijun. However, Shijun was someone who could foresee the future, so he wouldn't easily let himself killed. He contacted Du Jin and asked to meet up. They agreed to meet at a specific location. Later, Shijun called Dong Su and told him to come to the same location because Du Jin was the one killing Dong Su's fiancée. Both men knew they had been deceived by Yu Shijun when they met. Du Jin lowered his gun and apologized to Dong Su because he understood how agonizing it was to lose a spouse to murder. Du Jin now only wanted to kill Shijun. Dong Su also knew that Du Jin had been tricked, so he lowered his gun and hoped that Du Jin would turn himself in. Suddenly, Du Jin saw Shijun and swiftly pulled Dong Su back, shooting at Shijun. A gunfight ensued, and Du Jin was shot while shielding Dong Su. Du Jin promised to apologize to Dong Su's fiancée if he met her in the other world. Then, Du Jin passed away. Yu Shijun then arrested the minister since he was also a subordinate of the person in question. This person contacted a mysterious old man through the phone. They arranged to meet outside and killed the minister. Meanwhile, Shi Hyun, through her sketch, found the location of her brother, who had found his subject. It turned out to be an organization led by this woman, who controlled all the money in Korea to plot another financial crisis. When Shijun was about to kill her, Shi Hyun appeared. The siblings finally reached this outcome. Shi Hyun asked why he used this method, and Shijun said it was because the law couldn't do anything, so he had to take matters into his own hands. He told his sister to kill him because he realized he had made too many mistakes and couldn't turn back. But for the older brother she loved, how could she make a decisive move? Just as he pointed the gun at his sister, Dong Su arrived in time. Yu Shijun had now become a madman with multiple personalities. He aimed the gun at his head, but before he could pull the trigger, he received a bullet in his shoulder that left him unable to move. Du Jin wanted him to face punishment under the law. He couldn't just die like that. Finally, the plan of that major character was foiled. Yu Shijun was also imprisoned and would spend his entire life repenting for his sins. Our life is a culmination of the choices we make. We have the power to decide whether to use emotions or logic to guide our decision-making process. While both factors are important, our emotional reactions can often make things worse. When we allow our emotions to take control, our judgment can become biased and we may ignore reason altogether. Making choices based on logic doesn't necessarily guarantee positive outcomes, and oftentimes, the most rational choices can be the most painful. Every action we take has a consequence, which can be either positive or negative. Although the drama has some flaws, it emphasizes how our actions have an impact on those around us. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative and entertaining. Please hit subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. I can't wait to see you in the next one.